Hello, classic rock fans. I'm reporting a couple of days after seeing Tina, the Tina Turner musical, which was playing at the James Nederlander Theater in Chicago. And I'll say up front, I'm not an expert about musicals. I've seen very few. It takes a very strong hook to get me interested in seeing a musical at all. They generally don't do a lot for me. This one absolutely did. This was extremely appealing for me, and it's one of the only musicals I've voluntarily attended. One show that I had planned to see right when I started this channel was Escape to Margaritaville, the Jimmy Buffett musical. That was actually scheduled to play in Appleton, Wisconsin. I had tickets to go see the show, but I was not actually able to attend because that show was scheduled in, you guessed it, March of 2020. Of course. I recall that the 10th anniversary of the musical Rock of Ages came through Milwaukee at some point, and I briefly considered going to see that because that obviously has a lot of classic rock music in it. But I ultimately passed because I saw the movie Rock of Ages, and that movie sucks. So I just didn't want to see it on stage. All that to say, I have not seen a lot of musicals in my life, so I'm really not a good judge to tell you whether one was executed very well or executed very poorly. That said, I would be stunned if someone told me that this musical had been done poorly. I can only tell you my perspective as a classic rock fan and as a live music fan, and from that perspective, this show was fucking awesome. Kick-ass from start to finish. I give it an A+. I really enjoyed myself at the show. I thought the performances were amazing. I would love to see it again. And I give it such high marks really because of three aspects. One, the songs. Tina Turner's discography is unquestionable. Tina has such a deep catalog of incredible music to draw from that really any production using her music should be secure in that department. Talking about What's Love Got to Do with It, Proud Mary, Simply the Best, Better Be Good to Me, We Don't Need Another Hero from fucking Beyond Thunderdome. These are incredible tracks, so you just can't miss. But perhaps even more importantly than the songs are the performances of said songs. And in this musical, those performances were top-notch. They lived up to the high expectations set by the catalog. And that's really important and probably the best compliment I can give this show. The woman who played Tina at the show we saw was Zurin Villanueva, and she was spectacular. Sounded a lot like Tina, had an incredible stage presence, commanded every scene she was in, really top-notch stuff, very engaging. So she was spectacular, but I don't think she outshined the rest of the cast because the rest of the cast was also really good. Nobody missed a note on any of the numbers. All of the performances were really impressive. The songs were just executed very well, so it was just enjoyable each time they started up a new musical number. The only number I wasn't crazy about, I guess, is a song I'm just not too crazy about. Open Arms, which was played as a duet, that was the only one that really didn't grab me, but that's more of a comment about the song than how it was performed. And then the third major aspect that made this musical really good is, I would say, the emotional depth of Tina's story. Tina's life story is intense. It's a story of survival. It's billed as like a story of triumph, and there is that, but if you've seen the recent documentary about her, which is available on HBO, and you should definitely go see it, if you've seen that documentary, I think at least her story is much more that of survival and endurance than even triumph. She went through just unspeakably horrible things, just heartbreaking stuff. And some of that is portrayed quite brutally in the musical. The worst of it being, of course, the abuse she survived from her husband, Ike, who was a monster among monsters in the music industry. If you've seen the documentary or read her book or just know her life story, you are very aware of the torture that Ike put her through when they were married. you're also aware of how his specter cast a shadow across almost her entire career after she got away from him. Behind the scenes, Ike did all kinds of shitty stuff in the industry to screw her out of royalties and money and rights to music, and it gets so dark and so awful that if even a large amount of it was in this musical would be too miserable to get through. You can learn a lot about that by seeing the documentary about her, and they do touch on this stuff in the musical, and they certainly don't shy away from the physical abuse that Ike put Tina through. In fact, that might be the hardest part of the musical to watch, because it's done in an effective way, which means it's uncomfortable at times to sit through. So if you're going to this musical with someone who might be particularly sensitive about this stuff, or if you are particularly sensitive about spousal abuse, physical abuse, you really ought to know what you're in for, because there are those portrayals on stage, and it's not distastefully done, but seeing that portrayed on stage can be very painful for people who've endured it in their own lives. And another thing the play does not shy away from, another horrible specter that Tina dealt with through her whole career, of course, is racism and sexism. She's a black woman that came up in the 60s, and you bet your ass racism showed its ugly head again and again all through her career, and they definitely cover this aspect of her life in the musical, so just be aware. That's another part of the play that's potentially emotionally difficult. I mean, you're going to hear the N-word a couple of times. So this is a serious performance. It isn't just like a light show set to the music of Simply the Best and What's Love Got to Do with It. Like, this is an emotionally heavy show that is at times extremely serious and extremely heartbreaking. So, you should just be aware of what you're in for when you go. If you know anything about Tina's life, you should probably expect this sort of thing, but if you just know her radio songs, a lot of this might catch you off guard. And I guess if it does catch you off guard, that's not really bad, because then you're learning something. If you don't know much about Tina's life, well, this is a good opportunity to learn. And from here, see that documentary that's on HBO about her. Check out her book that she wrote. She's got a fascinating life story in the sense that it is truly incredible that she was able to survive and endure what she did and still reach the commercial and artistic heights that she did. She is in an elite tier of music legends in just music history that very few artists ever achieve. That's incredible in its own right. That would be incredible if she had every advantage going into it. But she didn't. She had the opposite of that. She had incredible disadvantages. But she did survive it all, she made it through, and she made it to the top. So, at least the story has a happy ending, and in the musical, it does end on a very positive note. Just trying to think if I have any criticisms of the show. Wasn't crazy about the song Open Arms, but that's just a personal preference thing. That's not a criticism. I will say some of the songs, and this isn't really a criticism either, this is just an observation. Many of the songs, and I think you see this in most musicals that are about artists, are sort of repurposed. Like, they are played at points in the musical where some of the lyrics kind of sync up with the story at hand. And there's an art to the placement of those songs, because it's not just about finishing on a big, uplifting number. If you're going through emotional scenes, you have to have songs with lyrics that mix well with what's being portrayed on stage. And by and large, they really succeeded at this. In particular, the show opener, Nutbush City Limits, was, I thought, portrayed excellently. Most of them worked really well. The only one that I felt might have been a little awkward was We Don't Need Another Hero. Because how could it not be? That song was for the soundtrack of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It doesn't really have a biographical aspect of Tina's life in it. So where are you going to put this song? The answer is in a scene in which Tina is dealing with the death of her mother. Which, on paper, I gotta say, someone must have did a double take when they looked at that. But I'm not saying it didn't work, because I think it did work. For one, there's definitely an emotional feel to We Don't Need Another Hero that if you kind of zone out on the lyrics and just let the music play through while you react to what's being portrayed on stage, I think the sound of the song fits just fine. And they also remixed the track a little bit, so it's a little more subtle and a little more somber. And some of the lyrics, again, if you're not really focused on the lyrics, you can just catch a couple of the words that fly through. Some of that works okay. But there may be a moment when you see her holding the urn of her mother and she's singing the words Thunderdome.
All we want is light beyond the Thunderdome.
I'm sorry, to me that's a little funny because that's just a little awkward. So I just wonder if in the script was that scene like missing a song and the writers were looking at her catalog and thinking, well, we gotta fit We Don't Need Another Hero in there somewhere. And they were just kind of it was the last scene in the last song that didn't have a corresponding piece, and they just kind of jammed them together to make it work. Sort of a square peg in a round hole situation. All that said, I still think it worked. It still played very well for me. I like that song. It was an emotional scene. I find stuff like this kind of funny, so yes, I found it funny, but it didn't ruin anything for me. And also, I'm a weirdo. Not everybody is going to think like this. Chances are most people are tuning out the lyrics of that song and just absorbing the music and enjoying the scene. And if that's what you're doing, it's totally fine. Okay. Last stupid little note that they don't need, and is not a criticism, but I just had this thought. If there was an opportunity, I think at least, to really put this show over the top, at least for me. So, at one of the last numbers, Simply the Best, that's the big finale before the encore. The whole cast is on stage singing, and there's a sax solo in that song. And for the sax solo, one of the guys from the band comes out on stage and plays the sax solo live on stage, which is awesome. Here's my note. If they were going to do it, they should have had the saxophonist be either dressed up to look like Tim Capello, or they should have went out and got Tim Capello to make a cameo. And if you don't know who Tim Capello is, he's the insanely jacked saxophonist who has a scene in the Lost Boys movie where he plays the song I Still Believe on the beach. It's the most famous scene from the Lost Boys. Well, that's what most people know him for. But what I know him for is that he was in Tina Turner's band for a long time. And he's on We Don't Need Another Hero.
Is it all or nothing?
You can see him in the music video for the other song off that soundtrack, One of the Living. That's a great music video, by the way. Tina Turner pretends to play guitar. It's hilarious. Anyway, all this to say is if instead of just some normal guy coming out on stage playing the saxophone, it was like some muscle-bound, oiled-up bodybuilder type who came out and blasted the sax solo, that would have put the show just through the roof for me. That would have been absolutely hilarious, and it would have been A++, whatever. So the last thing I'll say about the show is this. A couple years ago now, I was out in Las Vegas and I saw the Whitney Houston Hologram show. And I did a review of that show here on this channel. I will post the link to that video in the description of this one. And in that video, I talked about the conundrum that classic rock fans and fans of really the classic rock era of music and live music fans face when an artist retires or passes away. And I talked about how do we see their music live on stage if the artists themselves are simply not performing anymore. See a shitty bar cover band. You can see a specifically designed tribute act. Maybe you can see a concert film in a movie theater. Or you can see a hologram. Well, one I didn't think of is you can see a musical based on said artist. And now that I've seen this show, this might be the best option of all of them. Tina Turner played her farewell tour 2009. I think she did her last show ever in like May of 2009. I started seeing concerts regularly in 2008. So when I think of, someone like myself or fans that are younger, fans who recently discovered her music, she is permanently off the road. She doesn't even live in the United States. She lives in Switzerland, and she's also like in her 80s. Her onstage career is over. Her career is mostly over. She's largely retired, as far as I know. When they made that documentary about her a couple of years ago, she made an appearance to promote the doc, and also I believe this musical. And her appearance here was basically billed as her farewell to her American fans, as she's going back to Switzerland to happily live out the rest of her life. She talked about this in interviews. It's taken her a very long time to find like true peace and happiness because of the stuff I was talking about earlier, and just how far-reaching and awful the specter of Ike and everything around him really lasted in her life. So now, in her golden years, she finally has her peace and quiet, and it's not in this country. So if you want to see her songs performed live on stage, there might be tribute acts. I don't really know of any offhand. There's no Tina hologram, thankfully. But there is this musical. So if this musical comes to town and you want to hear Tina's music performed live on stage, absolutely go see this. Without a doubt, this is a fantastic experience. Even if musicals and theater aren't really your thing, her music being performed live on stage should be enough to get you to go see this show. I think you'll have a great time. I certainly did. And I can't wait to see it again. And lucky me, I think I'll get a chance. When these dates were announced in Chicago, I jumped at the chance to go because I wasn't totally sure that this show was going to make its way to Milwaukee. Well, of course, as the Chicago shows wrapped up, they announced the Milwaukee dates. But that's fine with me. I am happy to see it again in my city because now I know what I'm in for, and I know I'm going to be in for a great night. So, yes, I would really encourage anybody who likes Tina Turner's discography, anybody who wants to see Tina's music performed on stage, absolutely go see this show. You will not be disappointed. My only warning is, again, just be aware that this is a serious show, and this is an emotionally heavy show at points. And if you're going with someone who's particularly sensitive, or if you yourself are particularly sensitive, you'll want to be aware of that. That's all. Okay, I think that's all I got to say about this. Thanks for watching this video. Please hit subscribe. Please check out the other concert reviews and live entertainment reviews I've done on this channel. Like I mentioned earlier, the review to the Whitney Houston Hologram show, that link is in the description of this video, as is the link to my podcast, because I do a podcast. It is about classic rock. So if you like Tina Turner, I'm thinking you like classic rock too, so you might want to check out my podcast. I've had a lot of great guests on lately, and I'm sure I've talked about a different artist that you're a fan of as well. Also in the description are the links to our social media pages. Please follow us there. So with that, thank you for watching. Keep rocking, rolling on the river.
We're rolling, rolling.